My governors think money grows on trees.
Oh, come on. Fire next to a prefecture. Move out of the way. Move. Come. Let me build it. Let me build the thing. Move out of the way. Maybe the manual will explain something. What? As we all know, video games in the 90s were absolutely perfect and they had 0 issues. That's what people keep telling me anyway. And this city-building game based on ancient Rome, released in 1998, is something I know a little about. Caesar 3 holds a unique position in the pantheon of gaming. Even many who never play city builders or strategy games at all often know about Caesar 3. This could be due to schools in the 90s attempting to integrate educational games into their curriculums, or at least for extracurricular clubs and activities, that sort of thing. And there was an effort to push back against the claims that video games cause violence, which was proven wrong, but still repeated, frustratingly, until this day. But you'd often hear of many millennials today saying they knew a game because their school had it. Caesar, SimCity, Dino Park Tycoon, Lunar Lander, SimTown, and many more were used scatteringly throughout the world as teachers attempted to engage their students with more compelling media. Although it might not directly improve their grades, it could make a kid just more into their subjects. I learned words like archipelago from Civ and zealot from StarCraft. Yeah, I mispronounced them, but I expanded my language. I love nature because of games like Sim Park and Biosys. And having now worked as a full-time school teacher myself, I can say those teachers who wanted to integrate video games into their classes, they were on the right track. It's just school management and education ministries rarely care enough to implement these things cohesively, meaning educational gaming endeavors tend to have limited effects and fizzle out once that particular passionate teacher, your favorite one, leaves the school. Meanwhile, standing the test of time was not even a consideration by 90s game developers. I've asked them. Simon Bradbury told me himself. People might be playing this 20, 25 years later.
Nope. Absolutely not.
They didn't think anyone would be playing Caesar 3 even a few years after release. That's why Pharaoh was pushed out just a year later. That's how gaming was. And the fact that we're all still obsessed with Caesar 3 decades into the future is not only surprising to them, but also a tribute to what made Caesar 3 special. But what exactly made Caesar 3 special? Now, when it comes to playing old games, there's always some issues, and we can go over some fixes here. So first of all, there's the old CD version. If you happen to have a copy of the original Caesar 3, it may not come with the patches. There's some bug fixes, there's some bug introductions, and also the difficulty levels. For example, very hard difficulty was added in a patch that was not there in the original game. I'll link to these patches down below in case you happen to have a, quote, old CD version of the game. Now, you can get the game on Steam, and for the most part this works in like 95% of cases. But in some rare cases, for whatever reason, maybe your display or hardware is a certain way, the Steam version doesn't work on some people's computers properly. Just for unknown reasons, it just has problems. The best, most stable modern version of Caesar 3 is if you get it from GOG.com. That's a website if you haven't heard of them. They do tend to sell old games, and generally my rule is anything older than 15 years, it's best to get it from GOG. You can get modern games there as well, but anything older than 15 years, GOG tends to put in work to make sure the games continue to run properly on modern hardware and modern operating systems. They have a preservation program, but even outside of that particular program, they tend to work some fixes into their games. If you're playing an old original version of Caesar 3, you can also get the widescreen patch. This is a bit outdated right now, but you can get the game into HD widescreen without modifying anything else about the game. But also, if you're playing the original Caesar 3 today, I would heavily recommend getting the open source engine replacement called Julius. This, you can just get the game from wherever, as long as it's patched up to the most modern version. and you can just load the game files into Julius, which is this new engine. It takes all the original game files from your very legitimate install of the game and runs it better in pretty much every way. So you can get that as well, and I'll link below to some of these things as well so you can find out more information and where to get them. Now when it comes to the gameplay of Caesar 3, it is a city building game, but at the time, especially in 1998 when it first released, no other city builder really worked like this. You did build structures, you placed houses and people moved in, you placed down services and decorations and various other structures to keep your city growing and functioning. But the whole system worked on what we now call the walker system. And this is a maybe unintuitive way of how a city works, because the way this works is when you place down a service building, it sends out a walker. And this walker would take random turns at any intersections. And what your houses need are access to these services, but the services are provided by these walkers. So you need to build your city in a certain way where when you place down a market, the market lady that spawns at the market will walk over to your houses. In the original Caesar 3, there were limited ways to control how people could be controlled in this way. There were no roadblocks, there were no road controls. The best we had was on missions which had some military, you would get a gatehouse, which would be part of the outer exterior wall. But what you could do is you could use these gatehouses as a kind of roadblock. When you have an intersection, the walkers can't go through these gatehouses unless they have a specific destination in mind on the other side. So a market lady going to a granary, that's a very specific destination, that market lady can walk through the gatehouse and then walk back through it. But the service walkers that are spawning and walking around randomly, they can't go through these gatehouses. So if you build a perfect loop, like a 9x9 block, which is the most classic block design in Caesar 3, and you put a gatehouse right up against the block, you can have an intersection, but you also have a loop where every time a service walker spawns, they would 100% cover every house in that block. It's unintuitive, it doesn't make logical sense, and this is why the gameplay in Caesar 3 often is considered more puzzle game than city builder. This extends to various other things, the resource logistics when you place farms, these cart pushers carry the produce to the granaries or the warehouses. Controlling all of these walkers can be the main challenge, and I think is really the main challenge of Caesar 3, understanding this walker system and controlling the walkers. The limited controls you have when it comes to determining what goes into warehouses, the lack of limiting how much of each resource can be stored, leads you to just build entire warehouses and granaries for each individual resource. A messy, space-consuming, and wasteful approach, but it's the only way to keep proper control of your stuff. It's something really lacking in Caesar 3. Now, besides the city building stuff, there are also RTS mechanics. You place down forts and train up soldiers with weapons if they're legionnaires, or you don't need the weapons if they're just javelins. And you recruit these squads of units, which will then fend off invaders. These invaders will invade from specified points on the edge of the map, and they will come to destroy your city. You can build various defenses and towers and use your soldiers to fight off these invaders. These invaders do get tougher at higher difficulty levels. And this is also why Caesar 3 was often called a strategy game and not a city builder. And this blending of mechanics makes it very hard to properly classify Caesar 3 as either just a city builder, just an RTS, or just a puzzle game. It's really a mix of all three of these things, and that's the gameplay loop. Through all of this, there's other things like the gods. There's 5 main gods that you need to keep happy by building temples to them, and you can throw celebrations to these gods to make them extra happy, in which case you can get some blessings, which can be little boosts. Maybe Mars will wipe out an invading squad, or Ceres will boost your crops to 100% growth, just giving you a quick temporary boost of resources. But if the gods get upset, they can also curse you. There's minor curses and major curses, and they can be pretty devastating. In terms of controlling and understanding your city, there are all of these advisors as well, which allow you to control taxes and wages and see your mission goals and victory conditions, all the statistics required to understand your people, their population, their age. And some interesting things are like the working population is not your entire city population. There's actually an age range where they work, and this can be a little confusing and unclear to a lot of new players because your population does actually age. When people move into your city, they could be 20 years old and they'll be in the workforce until they turn about 50 and then they stop working. Your population doesn't go down, but your workforce shrinks. So checking all of these advisors to actually understand how your city is working and what is actually happening, at first glance, you might not really understand it, but the simulation and the gameplay does go a lot deeper than you would expect. Over the years, perfected optimal playstyles and techniques have been developed, and there are many in the Caesar 3 community that insist on this way of playing the game. But I did a playthrough of insane block designs just to prove that you can play Caesar 3 in any way you like and still win. Just look at this monstrosity, and this, and this. What was I even thinking with this one? Now, many people like to think of the 90s as this perfect utopia of gaming, that it was a golden age and everything was perfect and there were no issues. But Caesar 3, like any other 90s game, had its issues and weirdness, bugs as well. So for example, one of the most frustrating things in the game is houses can expand into gardens. So if you place a house and it goes from a 1x1 to a 2x2 to a 3x3 and then a 4x4, if there are gardens on the empty tiles around that house, the house could expand into those gardens. Now, one of the weird things that can happen is you have a 3x3 house and then you place gardens around it because it needs desirability and decorations to expand. So you have this 3x3 house, you place gardens around it, it expands onto those gardens, and because it expanded onto the gardens, it then loses the gardens that gave it its desirability needed to expand. So the house then begins to devolve. Now, when it devolves, it could devolve away from the road. So you can go from a 4x4 house and it becomes a 3x3 house in terms of size, and it's now one tile away from the road. But it doesn't just lose those tiles. Those tiles that it shrunk away from remain houses, but they just become a set of 1x1 houses, a strip of houses next to your now 3x3 house. And you can actually have the house completely despawn because if a house is too far away from a road, the house can't exist that far from a road and then it despawns entirely. And then any resources that house would have also get lost to the ether. This is just something that can happen and it's very frustrating. There's also a very weird thing with how your service and industry buildings find workers. So when you place down a working structure, it sends out this citizen walker, and this walker needs to go out and look for housing. If it doesn't pass any houses, then the building this guy came from doesn't get any workers. Even if there's a house right next door, this citizen walker needs to pass those houses. But once they pass a single house or just a couple tents, then the building the citizen walker came from can access your entire population. So you can just scatter some low-level tents around your industries, no matter where they are on the map, and then they can access your entire population. It's a bit silly and totally unrealistic, and that's how it works. Gardens can also act like roads for some reason, so if you just start gardening up your city, it can break that whole walker system where they take random turns at intersections. So if you place gardens all over your city and accidentally connect two different roads with a row of gardens, suddenly you've made an intersection. And then there's bugs. So with those patches I mentioned earlier, it introduced a very hard difficulty, and it basically completely broke the game in a very major way on very hard difficulty, and I don't even know how this was never noticed. There's an immigration glitch on very hard. where between a certain population range, it is impossible to have immigrants because there's a bug where after a certain population, it starts counting a happiness metric, and it starts counting that metric in a way where your people are guaranteed unhappy, so they will start moving out. So once you cross that population threshold, people move out until they go below that population threshold, then they're instantly happy again. Then people move in, and then out, and then in, and out, and in, and out, and it becomes impossible, or nearly impossible, to actually grow your city at all on very hard difficulty. It's actually insane that this made it into the game. And I know it's a bug because the creator of Caesar 3 said, why would we ever do that on purpose? Some people think this was done on purpose to make it extra very hard. No, it's just nonsense. Because once you cross a certain population, they become happy again. It's just a 100 population range where it doesn't work. So what you can do is create an immigration maze where people walking into your city have to go through a maze of wells or walls or aqueducts so that they take longer to get in. So you get enough immigrants on the map so that once they start moving out, enough people move in. So you cross the population threshold and then people get happier again. It's very, very silly. I did a whole playthrough dealing with this on purpose, and it's just ridiculous, really. There's also various other bugs. For example, signs count as mineable rocks, so you can place an iron mine next to the entrance or exit signs. Aqueducts can go along roads and still transfer water no problem. There's also something called forced walker, where it's an exploit of how the walker spawning was made just for visual differentiation and for no other reason. So a quick overview of how that works is that basically, for most 2x2 structures, the walkers would always try to spawn on the southernmost side that's connected to a road, and they will always try to return to the northernmost side connected to a road. In a standard housing block, they would just spawn and walk around the block and then go back home after they reached their maximum walking distance. But if you build a road that goes around a long way from the southern end of a building and then does an infinitely long road to the northern end of the building, well, then there's no road to turn around. And what happens is the walker just continues on this road, going from the southern end of a building all the way to the northern end of the building, and then you can force these walkers to go practically infinite distances. Now, this is an exploit of a mechanic, but it's become an established game design technique. So these days it's mostly accepted, but also it's just weird. And the most annoying and frustrating way to lose the game is just because of something that is scripted properly, but you're not told about. When you are invaded by enemy forces, they will spawn from fixed locations on the map, and you don't know where they're going to spawn from. Sometimes there's just a little opening in the trees at the edge of a map, and invasion forces could come from there. But not necessarily. The invasion points are fixed. They're scripted to invade from point A, point B, point C. So they're fixed to the map and they're not randomized in any way. So they are definitely coming from that direction on these specific dates. But if you don't know ahead of time, you could build up defenses on the wrong side of your city, or you just get invaded from a place where you didn't even realize was an invasion point. And the annoying thing about losing a map in this way is because you could get your city destroyed and, well, then you have to restart the city or reload. And the only thing you would change is where you would build your defenses. And you would only build your defenses there because of knowledge you had of the future where you know the invasions were going to come from. So you could do a save scumming technique where, oh, you think the invasion's going to come from the north, so you move your soldiers there, you build defenses there, you save the game before you do all of that, and then the invasion comes and they actually invade from the south and then they destroy your city. Well, you could reload and do a save scum technique where, oh, okay, now I know they're coming from the south, so you build your defenses in the south and you move your soldiers down there, they invade from the south, you hold them off easily. This feels cheesy, this feels save scummy, but if you lose the game and restart the map, they're still going to invade from the exact same spot. So when you restart the map, you would just automatically build your defenses in the south anyway because you already know where they're coming from. The game essentially incentivizes save scumming, and really it's the most fair way to play because you wouldn't do anything else different anyway. It's just about where the invasions come from. It's another weird, dated, uncomfortable mechanic in Caesar 3, and really there's many solutions to this, but Caesar 3 in vanilla, that's how it is, and it can be very annoying. Moving on to the graphics of Caesar 3, these hold up surprisingly well. It's colorful, vibrant, and a little cartoony, but not to the point where people would comment mobile game graphics. It emulates realism while not actually being realistic, which is a very nice balancing of art styles, because when you have that level of vibrancy and cartoony aesthetic, it does last and not age so quickly. And that's why Caesar 3 still looks good today, because it is not trying to be ultra realistic. You can see other games which try to be ultra realistic. What happens is, within 5 to 10 years, the ultra realism starts to just look old and muddy. This also uses an isometric design, and it uses grids, which is now a timeless design. A lot of people do complain about grids not being realistic or grids being outdated technology, but really grids in city builders is a preference. It does keep things organized and structured, so it really does just work forever. When you have organic, free-form city building, that can still have a lot of room for improvement, and older games with organic city building can start to feel uncomfortable at times. So this art style with isometric designs and grids makes it a timeless looking game that looks as good today as it did back in 1998. As a side note, the event cinematics are also great looking. They are, of course, low resolution and kind of dated now 3D animations, but they still have a lot of charm and a lot of detail, a surprising amount of detail, really. And the intro cinematic does show a lot of great visuals, and a lot of this style of 3D cinematics play throughout the game when your city catches on fire, or when there's an invasion, or when you throw a celebration to a god and various other events. They play these cinematics, they just add a nice punch to these events, so it really feels like things are happening. One problem I have with a lot of modern city builders is when an event happens, it's just a little notification, oh, a fire has broken out, and you just get a little notification, a fire has broken out. Whereas in Caesar 3, when a fire breaks out, it plays this animation of your city with dramatic music and, your city is burning to the ground. It not only gives you time to pause and react to the disaster or event, it really makes you feel like something has happened and not just a little notification has come in. Going from visual to audio, the music is actually really good in Caesar 3. It's timeless, and there's a reason for that. It's because a lot of the music is inspired heavily by Ben-Hur, the old movie epic. If you haven't heard the similarities, there are many melodies and themes that are carried over from Ben-Hur's soundtrack into the Caesar 3 soundtrack. Still mostly legally distinct, but there's a reason why it seems so iconic. It's because it is. Here, just listen to some of these similarities. You might think knowing about this almost sampling of older songs to make the music in Caesar 3 feel devalued, but honestly I feel like it's fine. It still sounds great and it's perfect for the theme, and it doesn't get old. It doesn't grow tired or anything like that. These songs are also locked to population count, so as your city grows past certain population milestones, the songs will change, and this provides a nice auditory sense of growth. You're not just looking at your city growing bigger, you're hearing your city growing bigger. And And I've played Caesar 3 for decades at this point, and I'm still not tired of the songs, and it doesn't feel repetitive. There's something about them that you could just listen to forever as background music while playing Caesar 3, and it's absolutely fine, which it's very rare in pretty much almost every game. In the vanilla original version of Caesar 3, these songs are a little grainy, and there's some static noise going through them. That can provide a nostalgic flair. But if you do want higher quality versions of the songs, there are HD versions of all the Caesar 3 songs. They exist, you can download them and replace your song files. If you want not just higher quality songs, but also extended versions of this background music. Sticking with audio, there's the voice acting, and city builders, even these days, don't always have a lot of great voice acting if they have voice acting at all. This one does go with the Romans have a British accent trope. The devs are from the UK after all, but it is that idea where ancient Romans spoke with British accents, and it works for this game.
Will that be a shave or a trim, citizen? Life here's all right, isn't it?
Walkers all have campy acting, just shy of being over the top.
I've been thrown out of my home!
Straddling that line of being interesting but not becoming too cheesy.
This city isn't too bad.
Writing is unique, often having memorable lines.
That fat lady up front told me to carry this and follow her.
And overall, this makes the lines when you click on your citizens, it makes them sound iconic. It makes you want to quote them, really, and repeat the lines in the way they're saying it. No sign of crime around here. Citizen, this place needs more workers. There are simply not enough workers in this city. Campaign intro briefings are also fully voiced, evoking emotion, expectations, and the voice actors do really communicate the subtext behind the writing, hinting towards rewards and punishments meant to motivate you through the missions.
The Roman Empire is in crisis. Whether because of Ceres' anger or due to human incompetence, famine stalks the empire. You have governed long enough now to understand the dire results of a lack of food.
While also explaining some of the game mechanics in the process.
The ratings that I defined for Carthago, although only moderate, eluded its former governor so persistently that he fell entirely out of my favor.
Speaking of the campaign, there is a campaign of set missions going through Caesar 3. Outside of the sandbox mode and custom maps, the fixed original campaign brings you through a story of Caesar training and testing a new governor, that being you. At the start, it's not even Caesar himself who talks to you, but more of a middle manager.
Caesar is at today's gladiator tournament and is unable to see you himself.
Just bringing you up as a fresh, new, potentially good governor.
Let your governorial training begin. First, you must learn the basics of constructing Roman settlements.
A little strangely, but you don't really notice it, everyone is immortal, as this loosely goes from city to city following historical events. It's kind of nice that it is a bit historical, but honestly, the history, it leaves a lot to be desired in Caesar 3's campaign. Mostly you're just going from location to location building cities, and there's like, oh, maybe there's larger invasions on this particular map because it's supposed to be Hannibal, but that's basically it.
Now that you have proven your skills, you are to found a small city just south of Rome.
Going through the campaign, it teaches you a little bit about how the game works, but it doesn't do a great job of explaining really how the game works. You need to read a lot to actually understand. For example, one thing you can do is building reservoirs. You can click and drag the reservoir to automatically build 2 reservoirs with an aqueduct connecting them, but you would never know this unless you read the extensive paragraphs of text. It also loosely explains the walker mechanics, but you don't really get it from the in-game explanations. Even if you read through it all, It's not something you would really understand as a kid, and generally adults aren't gonna read all of this as well. When the game was released in 1998, the primary demographic for video games was kids or teens or even young adults. This is why so many of us back in the day just didn't get it. But the adults who really spent time not just reading through the instructions and the essays of text in the game, they also went onto Heaven Games forums and asked people and figured out how all of this worked. Those are the people who figured out the game back in the day. These days, the game is just as confusing as it was back then. Although, having said that, the instructions in Caesar 3 are better than how it was in Caesar 2, which literally has a page titled "Enough Reading, Continued." You had to read a lot to understand Caesar 2. Now, as you go through the campaign, you do go through choices for most missions, either an economic or military map to choose from, but this split makes playing the campaign awkward, as it means you have to play through twice to see all the missions, and if you switch between military and economic choices, you'll have to remember your choice to make sure you choose the opposite one next time. It's not like the choices send you down different paths. After you win a mission, it just puts you on the next tier with the same choice either way. If there were consequences for your choices, besides which map you play, like in Age of Wonders 1, where you end up with different heroes and units and abilities depending on your choices, then this system could be compelling, but as it stands, it just makes you want to reload your last map and choose a different path to try and play all of the missions in one run. There's also no mission selector, so you can't go back to the main menu and pick the mission you want to play. You have to go through the whole campaign again to get to a specific mission, or cheat your way through. The earlier missions are also better than the ending missions. Maps like Lugdunum and Carthago, very hard to beat unless you actually understand how the game works, so most kids and teens back in the 90s stopped at around mission 7 or 8 of the campaign and never played anything further. Which might have been a good thing because the later missions, particularly the final missions, are pretty boring maps. They're just big open fields really, with not much challenge to them, or at least no new challenges really. Another weird thing in the campaign is that you can accumulate personal savings, and there's no limit to how much you can save. Technically, you could waste a lot of time on a specific mission and build up impossible amounts of personal funds, which you can then give back to your city on future missions, turning some challenges into walks in the park. Bringing some money from one mission to the next makes sense and can be a nice reward for overperforming, but incentivizing time wasting isn't a good thing to do in a game. Eventually, at the end of the campaign, you keep getting promoted until the final promotion, where you ascend to God and replace Caesar, which is the whole point of the story, where Caesar is essentially training a bunch of potential governors to find a replacement for himself. And it's a nice cap on the story, or the basic story that you're involved in Caesar 3. Plot twist, Caesar was breeding an exact clone of himself to replace him. Overall, the legacy of Caesar 3, despite its issues, is solidified for all time. Caesar 3 is like Hobbits. You can learn everything about the game in a week, but after 10 years of playing, it can still surprise you. This review does go over a lot of the details and generally what you can expect from Caesar 3, but there's so many tiny nuances to the game, and even some secrets in there, that you might only see after years, if not decades of playing. If you didn't know, many of the main developers at Impressions Games left the company after Caesar 3 to form Firefly Studios, and they ended up making Stronghold, which is kind of a combination of Caesar 3 and Lords of the Realm 2. So the developers of Caesar 3 are still around making games, just not city builders per se. In more recent years, Bianca released Julius, the open source re-implementation of a new engine for Caesar 3, spent 10 years making it, and it was open source, so it was completely moddable in any way the community saw fit. Which led to a team of community members developing Augustus, a branch of Julius, which is a modded, expanded, and improved version of Caesar 3, making the game more modern. Marek also made a Reconquered campaign, which you can download off of Heaven Games, and it is the original campaign, but overhauled completely with Augustus in mind. If you want a way to play the game, you can actually use Julius to play through the original campaign, and then install Augustus to play through the Reconquered campaign like a new game plus. And it's actually very interesting and a fresh new experience. Augustus has also put in a mission selector, so it's easier to navigate the campaigns these days. And because of these community efforts, Caesar 3 has become one of the best modern city builders, rivaling many new releases, even though it does still have a lot of weirdness and unintuitive game design. Once you get into it, in Julius and Augustus, it now feels like a much smoother experience and almost like what the original developers intended the game to be. Moving forward, there's infinite possibilities in the future for Caesar 3 as Augustus continues to develop every day, and it gets updated with new features, new mechanics, and improvements for the foreseeable future. And now for some questions from Patreon and patron supporters. First of all, Norman asks, in one of your videos, you mentioned something along the lines that Caesar 3 was meant to be played in a grid style, as opposed to the housing block style that players developed. Could I demonstrate that? So yeah, I mean, when Caesar was made, it was being modeled after SimCity, and the idea of block designs you can see in the official documents and documentations released by the developers and from the game itself. It doesn't really imply that you should be building blocks, and the idea of using gatehouses as roadblocks was not planned by the developers. You can see examples of this in, for example, the manual or other Caesar 3 documents, which show what the developers intended you to be building, and we eventually decided, no, we're not going to do that. RZ also asks, any info on what the original Impressions team thinks about the modern Caesar 3? So I have talked to Simon Bradbury. I have that interview with Simon Bradbury where I asked him about it, and I have not talked personally to any of the other people from the Impressions teams, but for Simon Bradbury, last I asked him, he knew about it, and he felt very honored that people would do things like that with his game, and he was very impressed with the scale of how far it has come. When I explained some of the mechanics, for example, the plague mechanic, to Simon Bradbury and how that worked, he said, yeah, I mean, things like that would be something that they themselves would have implemented if they thought of it and had time to do it back in the day. So overall, the Impressions teams, as far as I can tell, at least on Simon Bradbury's part, he feels quite honored that the community would not only still be playing Caesar 3, but want to take it further. Now, if you'd like to continue the journey, you can watch that interview I did with Simon Bradbury, the creator of Caesar 3, or you can watch 60 years of city building history in 10 minutes. I've linked to both of those on the screen right now. I'm sure you would enjoy both of them, so make sure you watch them both. If you enjoyed this, like the video, join on Patreon if you'd like to continue supporting this channel directly, or buy any game on GOG using the referral link down below, and it will directly support this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting and or useful, and I'll see you in the next video.
Thank you.